Okay, in this video I'm going to cover how to get GPS working for the Farmers Market Finder app and also getting that working on Android. We have to work with a couple permissions and do a couple special things for Android. So looking back at my document kind of guiding me on how to do all this that I made at the first video. When we start up the main app class, we have the onStart function which we've written, and we have this initialize GPS sort of area, and we haven't done that yet. And when we initialize GPS, we're going to want to show a blinker or some kind of marker on the map where our GPS location is. And I've called that the GPS blinker class. So I'm going to create a GPS helper sort of module or class. And the onStart method of main app will initialize this GPS helper, and this will start blinking the GPS blinker, which is a map marker on our map that shows where we are. Okay, so let's go over to our main app class. And you can see here we have a comment for where we want to initialize GPS. So I'm going to say GPS helper. This is the name of a class. I'm just going to initialize it. And maybe I'll say like dot run. Okay. So I need to create this GPS helper class and the run function. And I'll prematurely import it. So I'll say from GPS helper, import GPS helper. Okay, let's go create this file in this class. So over here, I'm in part 6. I'm going to create a new Python file called GPS helper. Yep, I'll add it to Git. Okay, class GPS helper, not inheriting from anything. Let's define the run function, which is what I called in main.py. So GPS helper, initialize it, and then run. Okay, when I run, I'm going to create a comment here because on Android we're going to need to request some specific permissions. So request permissions on Android. That'll be part of this run function. We also want to start blinking the GPS blinker. Okay, so we're going to need to get a reference to GPS blinker, which again I've not created yet, but I'm just sort of writing down the base code that we're going to need to make it start blinking. So get a reference to GPS blinker, then call blink. Okay, blink is a function that I'll create in GPS blinker. I can go ahead and I'll just write, pass here. I'm going to create this GPS blinker class right now. So I'll create a new file, Python file GPS blinker. Okay. And the GPS blinker is going to inherit from a map marker from the Kivy garden map view package. So I'll say from kivy.garden.mapview import map marker. Now let's define the GPS blinker class that inherits from map marker. And for now, I'm just going to, I'll define the blink function and I'll just pass for now. And inside the blink function, I'm going to want to have an animation that changes the blink size and I'll say opacity. So when I'm blinking, we'll have a little marker that changes the size and also the opacity of the little of the blink shape. I'll just make it a circle. And then when the animation completes, reset the animation and call it again, then repeat. Okay, so that's enough for now. I want to go create some Kivy code for this GPS blinker because I want to work with the canvas of this GPS blinker class to create the actual shape that'll be blinking. So I'll create this gpsblinker.kv file, add it to Git. Okay, here's my GPS blinker class. And for now, I'll just leave this alone because I just want to show the GPS blinker showing up on the map at first, okay? So basically what I've done at this point is I've created this GPS blinker class with no logic and no Kivy code, and by default this is going to show a picture of a red marker. So if you've watched the other videos, you know that we've got all these blue markers on the map for all the markets. Well, this one is going to be red because that's the default color. And I just want to show that when we start up our app, we can see this marker and then we'll actually make it into like the little blinking image. Okay, so now we need a reference to the GPS blinker because we've created the class, but we haven't put it anywhere inside of our actual interface. To do this, I'm going to go over to my map view, so farmersmapview.kv, and I want to put in as a child in my farmers map view the GPS blinker. And to do this, I need to import the GPS blinker. So I'll say import as GPS blinker, GPS blinker.gps blinker. And now because I've written some KV code for this class, I need to include that KV code. So include GPS blinker.kv. That's just this code that I just wrote right now. Right now there's nothing in there, but this will become important in a second. Okay, so we have our GPS blinker and we've put it onto our map. The last thing I want to do to just show that I have this marker on my map right now is I want to make the GPS blinker always be centered on the map. So I'll say lat. Remember, we have access to lat and lon for this GPS blinker class because it inherits from the map marker. Okay? So lat, I'll just set this to be root.lat. So it's the map view's latitude. And same with the longitude, root.lon. Okay, now, before I actually run this, let me just go over one more time what I've done here. When we start the app up, so on start, we're calling gpshelper.run. When I go over to GPS helper, oops, I need to put in some code here. In GPS helper, I need to get a reference to the GPS blinker. Now, to make a reference, I need an ID for my GPS blinker. I'll call him blinker. Okay, GPS helper will get a reference to the GPS blinker. From Kivy.app import app. I'm going to use the app to get a reference. app.getRunningApp.root.ids.mapView.ids.blinker. Okay, this is my GPS blinker. App.getRunningApp.root refers to this guy in my main KV file. Okay. And then app.root.ids.mapView gets me my farmer's map view. And then from here, .ids.blinker gives me inside my map view this blinker widget. Okay, so I've got a reference to my blinker. Now I just want to call GPS blinker.blink. This doesn't do anything now, but we'll put that logic in there in a moment. Okay. Great. So, sorry, from the top one more time. When our app starts up, we're initializing the GPS blinker and running it. Running it gets a reference to the GPS blinker and then starts blinking, which we don't have any logic in there yet, but we'll put that in. And then the GPS blinker is automatically put onto our map view because I put it as a child widget of the map view here. And just for now, I've set the latitude and longitude of the GPS blinker to be the same as the latitude and longitude of the map view here. Okay, let's run this and see what happens. You can see that we've got this nice red marker that's always in the center of our map. So this is basically where my GPS position is right now. I want to get rid of this marker. To do that, this is just an image, right? So I want to change the image to be something transparent, or basically no image. And then I'll create a couple circles here that blink using the canvas of the GPS blinker. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. By the way, this latitude and longitude, remember that's going to be the actual GPS of our phone, and that will code in a little bit later when we actually get to like the GPS portion of this. Right now we're just getting the interface up. Okay, so the blinking animation. I'm going to gpsblinker.kv so I can work with basically the interface code for my GPS blinker. And I'll say canvas.before. Now what we want to do in this canvas is create two circles. One will be an inner circle and one will be an outer circle that's blinking, and the inner circle will stay the same. We need to get a couple variables in here first that refer to like the size of the blink, or the size of the expanding outer circle. So I'll say default blink size. We'll just put this at like 25 pixels. And then blink size we'll set to 25 as well. We're going to be changing blink size, which will change the size of our outer circle. And then after the animation is finished, blink size will be reset to default blink size. Okay, now let's create the outer circle. First, we have to give it a color, RGBA. I'll say app.themecls.primary color. Okay, so just the main color of the material design themed app. And now rounded rectangle to create a circle. Radius, this is going to be blink size over 2. And then I'll put a comma here because this radius you can put in either four different elements, and you can change the radius of each corner of the rounded rectangle. Or if you just put one element and then a comma, it'll use this same one for all 4 of the elements there. So the radius, or the curvature will be the same on all of the corners. Okay, now the size of my circle now will be, let's see, oops, I need a root here, root.blink size. Okay, because I'm referring to this blink size up here. Size will be root.blink size for the width, and also root.blink size for the height. Okay, and position, if you do a little bit of geometry, you can think about this, maybe write it down. Position will be root.pos 0 plus root.size 0 over 2 minus root.blink size over 2. So that's the horizontal position, and then the vertical position will be root.pos 1, basically the same thing, plus root.size 1 over 2.0 minus root.blink size over 2.0. This is basically, this is basically making it so that the position of this circle, this sort of blinking circle, is always centered on the center of my GPS blinker. Okay? The inner circle, I'll wait for this because I want to show you how this outer circle works. Right now, blink size doesn't change at all. Blink size is the attribute that we want to change inside of our blink function. So we're back in our GPS blinker Python code, and we want to work with this animation to change the blink size and also the opacity. So to work with an animation in Kivy, you say from Kivy.animation, import animation. Pretty easy stuff. Now let's create the animation. I'll call it anim, and it's a new animation class. And now we specify the variable that we want to change and the value we want it to change to. So I want opacity to change to 0. So as it's blinking, it should fade out. Okay? So opacity should go to 0, and then blink size should go to, I'll say 50. So what this is going to do is it'll change the opacity of GPS blinker, and it'll also change the blink size, and it'll go up to 50. And because the blink size is changing, the radius, which depends on the blink size, will change. The size will change because it depends on blink size. And the position will also change of at least this circle. Okay? So that's our animation. Now we need to tell what we want the animation to perform on. So anim.start on self. So this is saying start the animation on the widget that is myself. So on the GPS blinker. And one more thing, we said when the animation completes, reset the animation, then repeat. So we can say anim.bind and then pass the onComplete parameter and say self.reset. So basically bind to this animation this onComplete function. So when the animation finishes, it'll call the reset function. What's the reset function? That's something we need to define still. So I'll say def reset self, and I'll just take args because it probably passes some junk. And I'll say self.opacity equals 1 and self.blink size equals self.default blink size. So what I've done in the animation is set the opacity to 0 and blink size to 50. And when it finishes, I'm calling reset, which sets the opacity to 1 and then the blink size back to 25. Okay? And then we also want it to repeat, so I'll just call self.blink again. So this will loop basically infinitely. Let's run our code and see if our blinking feature is working. Nice. Okay, you can see we still have this red marker in there. I forgot to take that out, but we've got this nice blinking of the background circle. Okay, that looks good. Oops. Let us fix the source. So remember, source is what defines the image of the blinker. I want this to be transparent instead of that red marker. There's a transparent image that comes with KivyMD. Inside KivyMD images transparent.png. So KivyMD/transparent. Oops. Okay, now if I run this, I shouldn't have that red marker there anymore. Perfect. Okay, that looks good. For the inner circle, I'm going to do pretty much the same thing. I'll put a color. I'll say RGB is 111, so we'll just make this white. And now a rounded rectangle. We want the radius of this guy to be the default blink size, so up here. Okay, so I'll say radius is root.default blink size over 2. Throw in a comma so it fills in for the rest of the corners. Okay, size will be root.default blink size and root.default blink size for both the height and the width. And now position, we'll have this be root.pos. Let's see if I've done this correctly. Okay, the white is a little bit offset because the position I didn't account for the radius. And then also we've got the inner circle is changing opacity, and we don't want that. Okay, so let's first fix the position. So root.pos plus root.size 0 over 2 minus root.default blink size over 2 and root.pos 1. Oops, this should be root.pos 0. Okay, back to the other side, plus root.size 1 over 2 minus root.default blink size over 2 in parentheses. Okay, let's see if I fix the the position. Okay, so that position looks pretty good. Now, I was a little bit preemptive with the work I did changing the opacity here, because like I said, the opacity changes the opacity of the whole widget, and both of the rectangles are part of the widget. So what I need to do is create a special color for just the outer circle and change the opacity of that. Okay, now to change the opacity of just the outer circle. To do this, I want to keep the primary color here, but I want to add on a special variable that relates just to the opacity, okay? So primary color right here is a list of 4 numbers, which specify the RGBA value of the theme.cls.primary color. So I want to take the first 3, Okay, I want to take the first 3, so I want to take RGB from the primary color and add on my own special opacity value. So I'll say root.outer opacity. Okay, when I index this guy and get the first 3 here, this returns a list, and RGBA is a list of 4 items. So to add one more item to this list here, I'm concatenating basically a new list with one element, which is the outer opacity. Okay, so this basically puts me at a list of 4 values, and the 4th value is this guy right here, which specifies the opacity. Okay, now root.outer opacity I haven't defined, so I'll say outer opacity, set that to be 1 at the start. And now outer opacity is what I want to change here, not the opacity of the whole widget. Okay, so I can just write outer opacity, and this should now work. So if I go ahead and run my app, you can see, oh, let's see, I didn't reset it properly. So outer opacity needs to go back to 1 rather than the opacity of the blinker. Okay, try again. Nice. Now you can see we have our little GPS blinker. That looks pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna change that from white back to our normal color, I guess. We'll see if that looks better. So RGBA app.themecls.primary color. Okay, let's check it out. Nice, that looks good enough. You're more than welcome to change how this looks if you want. Maybe add a third circle or something on the innermost side. But either way, I've done what I wanted to do, which is create a map marker called GPS Blinker, which blinks now. And now the next portion of this tutorial is to set up the GPS to make it so the map marker or the GPS blinker is always centered on the GPS value from the phone. Okay, so let me go up here and let's go back to GPS helper. Now, start the blinking. Okay, let's reformat this a bit. Okay, run. Request permissions on Android. We'll take care of that in a second. For now, we're just going to we'll configure GPS. Now, GPS is only going to work on mobile. So I want to check if I'm on mobile. To do that, I need to import from kivy.utils, import platform. Okay. So configure GPS. If platform is Android or iOS, platform equals iOS. Okay, now we want to, from Plier, import GPS. Plier is a really cool module with a bunch of cross-platform features for Android, iOS, and also on like Mac and Windows. Some of the features don't work on all platforms, like GPS. It is not going to work on your desktop computers. But either way, Plier module is what we will use, and it's also made by the same guys who've made Kivy, so you know it's going to be good. Okay, to work with the GPS module, you say gps.configure, and then we need to pass it some stuff, like on location. This means anytime a new GPS location is received, what function do I want to call, okay? I'll say self.update blinker position. And then also on status, which is the basically if the status changes for the GPS permissions. So if someone turns off GPS permissions or turns on GPS permissions. Okay, so on status, I'll call self.onAuth status. So these are both the names of functions which I haven't defined yet, but I'm going to. And then once we've configured the GPS, we need to actually start it. So we'll call it gps.start. And you need to put in something called the min time, which is related to how often it calls this, basically the on location function, how often it gets GPS data. So min time I'll just call 1000. This is the number of milliseconds. And then min distance I'll set to 0. I haven't used min distance really. I haven't found a need for it. You can check the documentation if you're interested, but for now we just want to call, we just want to get the GPS data every 1 second or whatever. Okay, so we've configured our GPS and we've started it. Now we need to actually create these two functions, update blinker position and on off status. Okay, let's define update blinker position. Gotta take in self, and I'll take in also args and kwargs. The keyword arguments is the important part here, because on location automatically passes to the function right here the keywords lat and lon and values in there. So the kwargs is where you get your latitude and longitude data. So my lat is kwargs indexed at lat, and my lon is kwargs indexed at lon. Okay, since I don't want to show my actual latitude and longitude, I'm just going to set them to like 30 and 30. Okay, so my map will not be accurate, but you just don't have to put in these two lines here and you'll get the actual latitude and longitude of your phone. Okay, and then I'll print GPS position so we can see it. Lat, my lon. Okay, cool. So we've got the latitude and longitude. Now let's update the GPS blinker position. Okay, so update GPS blinker position. So we need to get a reference, of course, just like we did up here. Get a reference to GPS blinker. And all that's left to do is say GPS blinker.lat equals my lat, and GPS blinker.lon equals my lon. Okay. Now on auth status, let's create this function. And we're going to take in two variables here. I'll call it general status and status message. Okay, so anytime this onStatus function receives a new status, it passes these two variables. So whatever function you set it to call, you need to make sure you take these two messages. And looking at these two messages is how you determine if the user has allowed permissions or not. Okay, so let's look at the general status message. If general status is provider enabled, that means that we've got GPS position. Okay, so I'll just pass, that's fine. Else, this means that someone turned off GPS, and I want to open a pop-up and tell them that you need to allow GPS. So I'll say self.open allow, or what did I call it back here? Open GPS access pop-up. Okay, open GPS access pop-up. Okay, that should do it. Def open GPS access pop-up. Here we go. And I'm going to create an MD dialog, so I need to import that. From KivyMD.uix.dialog, import MD dialog. Okay, and down here, let's create a new MD dialog. Title will be GPS error text. You need to enable GPS access for the app to function properly. Let's give it a size and position. So I'll say dialog.size hint. Maybe we'll have it be 0.8 and 0.8. Dialog.pause hint. We'll have this be center x 0.5, center y 0.5, and dialog.open. Okay, that should be enough. And we are at the point where we need to request permissions on Android. Okay? To do this, we need to use a special module called the Android module. So first, let's check if we're on Android. If platform is Android, we're going to import a couple things. So from android.permissions, import capital permission and request permissions function. Okay, now we need to actually request the permissions. So we can say request permissions, and then we pass a list of all the permissions we want to request, and then also a callback function. I'll say the function is called callback. I'll define that up here, def callback, and it takes a permission and results. And I'm just going to check if I was allowed everything. So I'll say if all res for res in results, throw some brackets around that. Then I'll just print got all permissions. Else print did not get all permissions. Okay, so we've specified a callback after we requested permissions, and now the permissions that we want to actually request, we can use the permission dot access course location, and also permission dot access fine location. The names of these two we're going to have to remember because we have to put these inside of the buildozer.spec file, which I'll show in just a moment. But before I move over to buildozer on my virtual machine in Android, I want to center my map on the blinker the first time that I get GPS location. So basically when my app opens up, it gets GPS location and centers the map on where the user is. I can do that right in here. I can just get a reference. Well, let's put a comment in here first. I'll say center map on GPS. Okay, so first I need a reference to the map. So I'll say map is app.get running app.root.ids.mapView. Okay, and then just call map.center on my lat, my lon. But this is going to be called every time we get a new GPS position, and I only want to call it once at the start of the app. So I'll say like if not self dot has centered map. Okay, then do that. And self dot has centered map. We'll set to true, and then we'll initialize that to false. Has centered map equals false. Okay, good. And last but not least, I need to go over and remove these two lines, which basically made the GPS blinker stuck on the center of the map. So I'll get rid of those two, and now we are ready to go over to Android. So I'm going to push all of this stuff to GitHub, and we'll go pull this down over on the virtual machine. Okay, so I'm on my Windows computer, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my virtual machine that I've been using to work with Bulldozer. Okay, now what I need to do is make sure that I'm in the Farmers Market Finder tutorial folder, and I'm going to git pull origin master so that my repository updates with all the stuff that I was just working on earlier in the video. And you can see I've got part 6 in here now. So I'm going to cd into part 6. Actually, first I'll cd into part 5. And you can see from the last video, if you watched it, I said I put in the bulldozer.spec file into part 5 here. So that's good. I want to copy that over into my part 6 folder, because in part 6, if you look at the contents, you can see I don't have the bulldozer.spec file. So I'll copy part 5/bulldozer, okay, into here. Good. So now if I list the folders, bulldozer.spec, perfect. Now I need to open up that bulldozer.spec file, because now, let's see, part 6, bulldozer.spec. Okay, now remember I'm using the plier module, so I need to go ahead and, in my requirements, add the plier module. And then if I do a search for Android, okay, Android.permissions. Now I need to add in my 2 permissions for GPS access. I need access course location and access find location. Boom, that should be it. My bulldozer.spec file is up to date. I'm going to close this. And just as I did in the other videos, my phone is plugged in, and I'll run bulldozer android debug deploy run logcat. Okay, and we'll come back in a moment when this is finished. Okay, my app has finished compiling, and now you can see it's asking me for permission for GPS, so I'll go ahead and allow it. Okay, it looks like there's a bit of a bug the first time that it asks for your GPS, because it asks for your GPS, but at that point it's already tried to center on your location. So I'll probably change this in the actual source code, but I probably won't cover this in the video because I've already made the video at this point. But if I go ahead and restart the app after allowing permission, you should see that it actually now centers on my latitude and longitude, which is over here at 30 and 30, as you can see is printed inside the console. Okay, so if you didn't overwrite your latitude and longitude, then it should be centered onto your location. In the next video, I probably will deploy this app to the Google Play Store. So I'll see you in the next one. Take care.